There's a pattern that plays out so consistently, it's almost predictable. Someone gets a raise, or lands a better job, or starts making more from a side business. And for a brief moment, usually a few days or a week, there's a genuine feeling of progress, of having gotten somewhere, of the financial pressure finally easing. And then, quietly, almost without noticing, the spending adjusts upward to meet the new income. The apartment that was fine becomes a little small. The car that was adequate starts feeling outdated. The restaurants that used to feel like a treat become the default. The weekend trips that were occasional become regular. None of it feels like a decision. It feels like normal life catching up to where you are now. But what's actually happened is that the raise that felt like progress has been entirely absorbed by a life that costs more. And the financial distance between income and expenses, the gap that actually determines whether money builds over time, is exactly where it was before. This is lifestyle inflation. And the reason it's so common is that it doesn't feel like a mistake when it's happening. It feels like enjoying the results of your work. It feels like you've earned the upgrade. And in one sense you have. You did the work, you got the result, and spending some of it on a better experience of life is not inherently wrong. The problem is not that spending increases with income. The problem is when spending increases at exactly the rate of income, or faster, so that the percentage of income that goes to building anything stays constant or shrinks despite earning more. You make more and you have more to show for it in terms of lifestyle, but you don't have more to show for it in terms of financial progress. The margin hasn't grown. It's just been consumed differently. The core of the lifestyle inflation problem is that spending decisions are made relative to income rather than relative to goals. When income goes up, the implicit question most people answer is, what can I afford now that I couldn't before? The more useful question, the one that produces actual financial progress, is, what does my financial situation require and what do I want to do with what remains after those requirements are met? The first question has an answer that expands automatically with income. The second question has an answer that is grounded in something other than what's currently available. Before any raise or income increase is spent, there is a sequencing decision that determines whether the additional income builds anything or simply becomes the new baseline. The sequence that works is this. The additional income first goes to filling whatever gaps exist in your financial foundation. If you don't have an emergency fund, a meaningful portion of the increase goes there until it's funded. If you have high-interest debt, a meaningful portion goes to accelerating payoff. If you're not contributing enough to retirement to at least capture employer matching, the increase covers that. These are not glamorous uses of additional income, but they're the uses that compound over time and that your future self will most directly benefit from. Lifestyle upgrades are felt immediately and then normalized. Foundational financial progress is invisible in the short term and transformative in the long term. Only after the foundational allocations are in place does the lifestyle question become appropriate to ask. And when you ask it from that position, the answer tends to be different than when you ask it with the full raise available and no prior claim on it. Because from that position, you're making a deliberate choice about how to spend a portion of income that has already done something useful. You're not just spending a raise. You're spending the portion of a raise that's left after you made your future financial situation meaningfully better. The specific percentage of an income increase that goes to lifestyle versus building is not fixed. It depends on where you are financially. If you're early in your financial life with no savings and meaningful debt, a larger portion of any increase should go to building. If you're already in a solid financial position, a larger portion of an increase can reasonably go to lifestyle without compromising the trajectory. The point is not austerity. The point is intentionality. Most lifestyle inflation happens without any intentional allocation at all. The income arrives, the spending adjusts, and the question of how much should go where never gets asked. Asking it changes the outcome even when the answer allows for significant lifestyle improvement. Fixed costs are where lifestyle inflation does its most lasting damage, and they deserve specific attention. When someone's income increases, the temptation to upgrade fixed expenses is strong. Better apartment, better car, better phone plan with more storage, gym membership at the nicer place. These feel like improvements, and they are improvements in isolation. The problem is that fixed costs are sticky. They're much easier to add than to remove. Moving to a more expensive apartment commits you to that cost for a year at minimum and carries the friction of moving to undo. Taking on a car payment commits you to it for 3 to 5 years. Gym memberships are notoriously difficult to cancel. Each individual upgrade seems reasonable, but the accumulation of fixed cost increases across arrays rapidly consumes the entire increase in a way that is very difficult to reverse without significant disruption. Variable costs, by contrast, inflate more gently and can be adjusted more easily. Eating at nicer restaurants more often is a real lifestyle improvement that can be dialed back if circumstances change. Buying better groceries is flexible. Taking more trips is reversible. These variable improvements are not free of lifestyle inflation risk, but they carry less commitment than fixed cost upgrades. The sequencing principle for lifestyle improvements is to favor variable costs over fixed ones when you're earlier in your financial life, and to reserve fixed cost upgrades for situations where the improvement is substantial and you've confirmed the new income level is stable rather than temporary. The new income stability question is one most people skip. When income increases, there's a natural tendency to treat the new level as permanent before it's been established as permanent. A new job that pays more might not survive a probationary period. A freelance surge that has been running for 3 months might be seasonal. A commission that was exceptional in 1 quarter might not repeat. Adjusting lifestyle to the peak of an income that hasn't proven to be sustainable is one of the mechanisms by which people end up in worse financial positions despite having had a period of higher earnings. The rule that protects against this is simple. Don't adjust fixed costs to a new income level until that level has been stable for at least 6 months. Variable costs can respond sooner, but commitments should wait for confirmation. The social environment around income increases creates its own pressure. When your income grows, the people you spend time with may or may not know about it, but the signals you send about your lifestyle change. You start going to different restaurants. You start wearing different clothes. You move to a different neighborhood, and your social environment adjusts to the new signals, which creates expectations that become their own form of financial pressure. The lifestyle that was an upgrade becomes the baseline that your social context now assumes, and dropping back to the previous level, if necessary, carries the social cost of appearing to have regressed. This is not a reason to hide income growth or to refuse all lifestyle improvement. It's a reason to be thoughtful about which lifestyle signals you want to permanently establish, because once established, they create expectations that carry their own costs. The comparison mechanism that drives a lot of lifestyle inflation is worth examining directly. Most lifestyle upgrades are not driven purely by a desire for a better experience of the specific thing being upgraded. They're driven, at least partly, by comparison to what others have. The neighbor's car, the colleague's apartment, the social media feed full of restaurants and vacations. Comparison-driven spending is spending calibrated to someone else's life rather than to your own goals and values. It produces a moving target because there will always be someone with more, a nicer version, a newer thing. The financial strategy of keeping up with comparison is a strategy that has no end point and no satisfaction built into it, because the standard is always being reset upward. The alternative is calibrating to your own defined priorities rather than to external comparison. This requires knowing what your priorities actually are, which sounds obvious, but is not. Most people have a vague sense of what matters to them, but haven't articulated it specifically enough for it to function as a real decision-making framework. When you know specifically what you're building toward, what experience of life you're trying to create, what the money you're saving and investing is actually for, comparison-driven spending loses some of its grip. Not all of it, because the comparison mechanism is deeply human and doesn't disappear through understanding, but it becomes one input among several rather than the primary driver, which changes what gets bought and what doesn't. The automatic increase principle is worth building into your financial structure. When income increases by any meaningful amount, an automatic increase in savings and investment contributions should happen simultaneously, not after you've had time to feel the new income in your account. Simultaneously, before the new income has a chance to become the available to spend baseline in your mind. This is the proactive version of paying yourself first applied specifically to income growth. Every time income grows, savings grow proportionally. The lifestyle can improve with the remaining increase, but the building never pauses. This principle, applied consistently across a career of increasing income, produces a financial outcome that is dramatically different from letting lifestyle fully absorb each income increase and then trying to save from what's left. The retrospective test is useful for keeping this honest. At the end of each year, look at what your income was and what your savings and investments grew by. The growth in savings as a percentage of the income growth tells you whether income increases have been producing financial progress or just better living. If your income grew by $15,000 and your savings grew by $1,200, lifestyle has absorbed 88% of the increase. That's not a judgment. It's information. Information that tells you whether the trajectory you're on leads where you want to go. Most people don't run this calculation because the answer is uncomfortable. But uncomfortable information, faced honestly, is the beginning of change. Comfortable ignorance keeps everything exactly as it is. Lifestyle inflation is not something to eliminate entirely. Living better when you earn more is reasonable and human and fine. The goal is not to live as though nothing changed when everything has changed. The goal is to ensure that as income grows, the portion of that growth that builds your financial future grows too, not just the portion that improves your present. Both can grow simultaneously. Both should grow simultaneously. The mistake is letting lifestyle grow at 100% of income growth while financial progress stays flat. The fix is simple in principle and requires ongoing attention and practice. Decide, deliberately and in advance, what portion of every income increase goes to building before the rest becomes available for spending. Make that allocation automatic. Review it annually. And let the lifestyle improve within what remains, intentionally and without guilt, because the foundation is growing underneath it. That's the whole structure. Income grows, allocation happens first, lifestyle improves within what's left. Repeated across every income increase over a career, that sequence produces a financial life that actually reflects the work you've done, not just a more expensive version of where you started. The identity dimension of lifestyle inflation is underexplored but significant. As lifestyle upgrades accumulate, they start to define how you think of yourself and how others think of you. The neighborhood you live in, the car you drive, the restaurants you frequent, the vacations you take, these become signals of who you are rather than just choices you made. And signals, once established, create social expectations that carry their own financial pressure. Maintaining a lifestyle that has become part of your identity is different from maintaining a lifestyle that's just a set of habits. One feels necessary, the other is negotiable. The longer lifestyle inflation runs unchecked, the more the upgrades shift from negotiable choices to identity-defining commitments that feel impossible to reverse without feeling like you've failed in some fundamental way. This is why addressing lifestyle inflation early is so much easier than addressing it after it has run for years. In the early stages, the habits aren't yet identity. They're just habits. The restaurant you've been going to for 3 months is a habit. The restaurant that's been your regular place for 4 years is part of who you are in a way that stopping feels like loss. The apartment that was an upgrade 18 months ago is still an apartment. The neighborhood you've lived in for a decade is home in a way that carries emotional weight beyond the monthly rent. The earlier you establish the practice of deliberate allocation before lifestyle adjustment, the more of the adjustment you preserve as choice rather than identity. The children dimension is worth naming because it introduces a variable that changes everything about lifestyle inflation dynamics. When children arrive, lifestyle costs increase in ways that are partially controllable and partially not. The controllable part, the choices about experiences, activities, environments, and things purchased for children, is subject to the same inflation dynamics as adult lifestyle. Parents tend to benchmark their choices against other parents, which creates comparison pressure that compounds quickly. The uncontrollable part, the baseline cost of raising children in terms of food, healthcare, education, and time, is real and should be accounted for in any financial plan that includes a family. What happens to many families is that the children's arrival coincides with a period of income growth, and the income growth gets entirely absorbed by both the children's baseline costs and the lifestyle upgrades that feel appropriate to the parenting environment they're moving in. The result is that despite making significantly more than they did before children, the financial margin is no different or worse. The income growth produced a better lifestyle and a more expensive parenting experience rather than any underlying financial progress. Building explicit savings and investment allocation before children arrive, and maintaining those allocations through the arrival and adjustment period, requires intentionality that most people don't have because the adjustment period is overwhelming and the financial planning tends to deprioritize. But the compounding value of maintaining those allocations through precisely that period, when income may be high and the instinct is to spend on the family experience, is enormous over a 15 to 20-year horizon. The partner or spouse dynamic is the other variable that changes lifestyle inflation in ways that purely individual financial advice doesn't capture. Two people with different spending tendencies, different ideas about what a good life looks like, and different relationships to money create a household where lifestyle decisions are negotiated rather than made individually. Lifestyle inflation in couples often happens not through one person's decisions, but through the accumulation of each person's preferences, each of which seems reasonable individually, but which together produce a lifestyle cost that neither person would have chosen alone. The solution requires financial conversations that most couples find uncomfortable, specifically about what lifestyle they're trying to build, what they're willing to prioritize over others, and how they make shared decisions about spending that affects both of them. The practical mechanism for managing lifestyle inflation as a household is the same as for individuals, with the addition that both people need to agree on the allocation principle before lifestyle decisions get made. An agreed-upon percentage of any income increase that goes to savings and investment before any lifestyle adjustment happens is a rule that protects both parties from the other's preferences expanding the lifestyle in ways that prevent financial progress. That rule requires one conversation to establish and prevents hundreds of smaller arguments about individual decisions. Because the principle is agreed, the individual decisions can be evaluated against it rather than against each other's preferences. The review habit is the mechanism that keeps all of this honest over time. Once a year, looking at what income was, what savings grew by, and what the gap between lifestyle cost and income looks like, tells you whether the allocation principle is being followed or whether lifestyle has been quietly outpacing the plan. Most people don't run this review because the results are uncomfortable when the plan hasn't been followed. But the discomfort of an annual review is vastly preferable to the discomfort of arriving at retirement age with a lifestyle that was expensive and a financial position that doesn't support it. The annual review is not judgment. It's information that allows course correction while course correction is still possible. Every income increase is a decision point. The money will go somewhere. The question is whether it goes where you chose or where momentum and habit and social pressure directed it. Choosing requires a moment of deliberate thought before the money has already flowed into the lifestyle. That moment, created intentionally and used consistently, is the whole practice. It doesn't require sacrifice. It requires sequence. Build first, improve after. Every time, without exception, the lifestyle that develops within that structure is sustainable. The one that develops without it is comfortable until it isn't. One more dimension worth addressing is the role of visible wealth versus actual wealth in driving lifestyle inflation decisions. Most of what people observe about others' lifestyles is the visible part: the car, the house, the vacations, the restaurants, the clothes. What is not observable is whether any of that is owned outright, financed, or mortgaged to the limit. The person driving the expensive car might be cash-rich and investment-heavy, or they might have a car payment that consumes a significant portion of their income and minimal savings. From the outside, the two are indistinguishable, and the comparison that drives lifestyle inflation is usually made without the information that would change the conclusion. People are comparing their financial interior to other people's financial exterior. The interior that includes what you actually own, what you actually owe, what you're actually building, versus the exterior that consists of observable signals that may or may not reflect the interior accurately. Recognizing this systematically changes the comparison dynamic. The lifestyle that looks worth having from the outside may be exactly what it appears, or it may be financed in a way that makes the person living it more financially fragile than someone half as visibly prosperous. You cannot know from observation, which means observation is an unreliable basis for lifestyle decisions. Your basis should be your own financial situation, your own goals, your own trajectory. What you observe in others tells you almost nothing useful about whether you're on the right path, because you're not observing the path. You're observing one moment of one dimension of it. The freedom that comes from breaking the comparison habit is not just psychological, it is concretely financial. When you stop calibrating your spending to what you observe in others, you free yourself to calibrate it to what your actual situation and goals require. Sometimes that means spending more than you were, because you were underspending relative to what you could sustainably afford while still building appropriately. More often it means spending less, or spending the same, but differently, on things that actually align with what you want from your life rather than on things that signal what you want others to think about your life. That reorientation from signaling to living tends to produce both more satisfaction and better financial outcomes simultaneously, which is the combination that is genuinely rare and genuinely worth building toward. Lifestyle inflation will always have some pull. The pull comes from real human needs for comfort, for belonging, for the feeling that progress is real and tangible and visible. Acknowledging those needs and meeting some of them deliberately within a structure that also builds the financial life you actually want is different from letting them run unchecked. The structure is simple. The discipline is in maintaining it through the moments when the pull is strong. And the result, compounded over enough years, is a financial life that reflects genuine choices rather than accumulated defaults. That is what all of this is for.